Hi, this is Nancy Earl, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And today we have a really wonderful guest. Shelley Kaehr is here, and they call her the Past Life Lady. And I'm so excited she's here. She's been here before, but today she's coming back to talk to us about past lives with pets. And I know y'all have pets out there, and we all love our pets. And this is how we can connect with our pets and find out if we've been with them before. But before I bring Shelley on, let me give you a little information in case you don't know about Shelley Kaehr. And it's pronounced Kaehr, and I always say Kaehr, so I apologize. It's Shelley Kaehr, also known as the Past Life Lady. She's one of the world's leading authorities on energy healing and mind-body medicine, a past life regression practitioner in private practice for 20 years. Now, Shelley received her PhD in parapsychic science from the American Institute of Holistic Theology and is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, master hypnotist, and master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. Today we'll be talking about her latest book. Here we go, you guys. Past Life with Pets. Shelley, welcome to High Road to Humanity.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you. I want to know why you wrote this book. Well, we all love our pets, but what prompted you to put this thing together?
Sometimes I do things as a kind of a little bit of a joke because I was busy telling some friends about why I want to come back as my cat in a future life because he's so spoiled. And so then it kind of spiraled into some other things. And then, of course, over the years, I do help people with, serious issues during past life regressions, but once in a while, they find out, hey, wait a minute, look, there's my dog or there's my cat. And so this is just compiled from like tidbits of longer sessions that I've done over the past 20 years. And I just thought maybe it would be timely to do something a little fuzzier and fluffier.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was really interesting because every regression that you did, and you guys, all these regressions are in her book, they all learned something from their experience. And it was interesting to see that their pets were there with them and then they're back again. It was crazy. I didn't realize this.
I think that it speaks to the idea of like soul families, that I really believe that a lot of the people we encounter in life are people we've known before. And so wouldn't it make sense that the pets would be people, and I mean that really literally, that we've encountered before, because our pets are some of our most important relationships that we're ever going to have in our whole lives. I mean, they've got your back, they're with you 24/7. You're telling all your darkest secrets to them, you're crying on their shoulders. And so I think these pets do return. And a lot of the time they're there, to be that unconditional love and that presence of having a supportive friend who really knows you and really loves you.
Right. And doesn't judge you because they just love you unconditionally. I like that part.
Yes.
Hey, you talk about the Hindu religion, and you also talk about the Buddhists. Now, the Hindus believe a soul can come back in animal form, but Buddhists don't believe that. So some people believe it and some people don't. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of more Eastern religions that believe that it is possible to become animals in past or future lives. The Hindus being one of them. Buddhists think of it more as that would be a lower leveled life form. Not that animals are low. Personally, I think they're a higher form of life, but because animals are more instinctual than nature, they have less control over emotional things. And fortunately, because animals do suffer a lot,
right,
largely and sadly at the hands of humans. So the Buddhists would think that is a much kind of lower life form that would be very uncommon. And then some religions, I think most Christians probably would never believe that it's possible to reincarnate as an animal.
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about some of these regressions that you did, and we're also going to talk a little bit about animal spirit guides, which I find fascinating. The shamans believe in that, and I've always thought that animals, that you have a totem, they call it a totem, I think, when you bring your animal in. You did all these case studies. Now, the case studies are in the book. Are they done specifically for pets, or were they just done and they happen to have a pet associated with it?
All of them were done as part of a different issue that people come to see me about. And then they were I mean, a couple of the case studies in this book, the client was going through a divorce, for example, and then it just happened to coincide with the death of an animal. And there is a
Right.
lot of that in the book, where I'm trying to help readers come to terms with the grief that we feel when our beloved pets pass away. So there
Right.
was a couple of those where they were simultaneously dealing with pet loss in addition to some other big issue in life.
Right.
But for the most part, a lot of the other reasons why people come for regression would be like to find out their soul purpose, or
Right.
because they're fascinated with different aspects of their life, and then they see the pet there as a kind of a pleasant byproduct of a longer session.
Right. I wrote down animals, this is from your book, animals often allow us to see our behaviors and rise up to a higher standard and a way of being in the world. And that's more suited towards peace and tolerance. I thought that was really cool because they kind of make us realize, how important life is. And you talk about that. You talk about cats, and I want to start out with something that happened to you. You did a regression. You went back to Scotland in 1832. And you talk about a sheep, and then you talk about your cat Biscuit. Can you tell that story, Shelley?
Yes, this is the same cat I was mentioning, that is so spoiled. He is my little baby boy, and he's one of these ragamuffin cats. So he's
Okay.
like a fuzzball who wants to be carried around like a throw pillow. And so I wanted to know, how I had known him before, because it was clearly destiny. I kind of got a vibe that I needed to go get him, and there he was. I think there's a real destiny when we have an animal that we really love. So, but what's interesting about the regressions, Nancy, to me always, is that if I wanted to make up some stuff about how I knew Biscuit, it certainly wouldn't have been what actually came through during the
Right.
regression, because it was so real. I went into the past life. I was in Scotland, and I was a little girl, and I lived on a farm, and my family owned a bunch of those Scottish sheep, those
Yes.
big woolly gray
Yeah.
sheep.
Yeah.
And I saw myself out in the beautiful lush landscape in the hills. And so my parents had given me this one sheep to take care of, and I was brushing him and taking care of him. And he was just being really cute and fuzzy, just like the same cat I have now. And then the little girl who I got very ill and I passed away.
Oh, yeah.
The sheep was just really heartbroken. And in this lifetime, Biscuit, when I got him from the pound, he doesn't really make a lot of noise. He can meow. At first I thought maybe somebody had actually heard him and he wasn't able to talk, but he usually just goes, you know.
That's his noise. I love it.
Your listeners enjoy that? I don't know. They've never heard that one. I'm sure. I've got more friends, I can tell you that.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, he sounds like kind of weird, And in the regression, I went, oh my gosh, he sounds just like he did when he was a little sheep. And I Googled this up. I said, I want to go get on Google and see if I can find this. And I went, oh my gosh, there's a sheep on Google that looks exactly like him, even with the same little legs, because his little legs kind of go out. So adorable. But I saw that, like, when I go out of town, like, even if I go out of town, like, for 24 hours, he can get really sick. Like, he'll start getting depressed, he'll sneeze, and he'll just be like, oh, like, when I come home, I have to practically bring him
Right.
back to life.
Right.
And my guides were just showing me that this is because of this life when I left him, and he got very sad. So he gets very worried when I'm not around him all the time.
Yeah.
So now I wait on him hand and foot 24 hours a day.
Well, and I like what you said in the book, that you're connected mentally, because when you talked about when you went to a meditation and you were really out of your body and you were meditating like for a week or something at a retreat, and then you say that your cat was just so sad because the connection there was lost. Usually when you go out of town, you still have the connection, but this time, because you were, really focusing on being somewhere else, that it affected your cat so much. And I found that interesting.
Yeah, one of the books I read many, many years ago when I was first getting into energy medicine was that Secret Life of Plants,
Okay.
where the author was actually hooking up plants to like a lie detector test. And so the author realized that, like, when the master, you don't even think of a plant as being alive, but of course they are, that about 10 minutes before the master would come home, there would be a bzzz on the lie detector test.
Oh,
And then you would get
wow.
like a little excited energy right as you were getting ready to walk through the door. And scientists have discovered, that our animals really do kind of read our minds.
Right.
That's why your dog's waiting for you at the door. That's why the cat's, doing whatever the cat's doing. And
Right.
so, when I was in that super altered state, because we were in a silent retreat for 10 days, not allowed to actually speak or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but you're supposed to be concentrating very fully on the teaching. And I did feel like we were that was the most disconnected I've ever felt from Biscuit, even more than times when I've been on the other side of the world on a real vacation, because I wasn't even that physically far from my house when I was doing that meditation. But I think
Yeah.
we are connected with our animals more than we maybe
No, I
often.
agree. I have cats and I've had dogs, but I've always had cats. I grew up on a farm, but I have a cat and it makes me think about Gracie. She's a ragdoll cat. She's one of those cats that collapse when you pick her up like a ragdoll. And she was a rescue. We found her in a boat, believe it or not. And she's beautiful and she's got blue eyes and she sleeps with me. So she's near and dear to my heart. And my husband and I went on a trip and we couldn't take the cats. We have two cats. And, so we took her to the vet and they called us. We were gone for maybe 2 days and she wouldn't eat or drink. And they said, you have to come get her. And I was shocked. She did not want to be there. And I had to call a neighbor because we were so far away and have the neighbor come and pick her up because they said, we're going to have to put an IV because she won't eat or drink. And I have never experienced that before, but she's so attached to me and my husband that she just didn't want to be there. And that was her way of, I guess, just, sticking her claws in and saying, I'm not going to eat or drink until you pick me up. It was crazy. And then the neighbor picked her up and she was fine.
I used to do some animal healing and animal communication stuff many years ago. I briefly mentioned that in the book as well. And I
Yeah.
went out to a couple of dogs who were in that same situation. They got really upset.
Yeah.
And when I went out to see them at the kennel, they of course wanted to go home. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. Cats
Yeah.
are usually okay, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
guess not always. I guess it depends how attached they are because they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we had her since she was a baby, so I guess that's what happened. Hey, listen, we're getting ready to go to commercial break, but you guys, you got to pick up this book. I'm going to tell you, I enjoyed this so much, Shelley. Honest to God, I loved it. She has stories in here, guys, about cats, dogs. We're going to talk about it. Horses, birds, all kinds of animals. She's got guinea pigs. I can hardly wait. There's even one about a shark, which is really, really cool. So you got to pick it up. It's called Past Life with Pets. Discover your timeless connections to your beloved companions. I'm here today with Shelley Kaehr, and this is High Road to Humanity, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and we're here today with Shelley Kaehr. We're talking about past lives with pets. There was a really cool story. I love these stories. I had a ball reading these, by the way, Shelley. The one about Keith and how his cat weathered storms. His cat Lucky. Can you tell that, or do you remember that one where
That's one of my favorites.
Mine too. Tell that story because it's amazing to me.
Yeah, I have a lot of, I mentioned earlier in the show about the soul connection that we have to certain groups of people. So I have a soul group in Pensacola, Florida area. And so
Okay.
I was going there for many years doing different expos, and I met all kinds of people in that area. And one of them was my client, who in the book, all the client names are changed. So in this book, he's called Keith.
Okay.
But a lot of the people in Florida, during some of those really bad storms, some people I know lived in FEMA trailers. They've had a really hard time because the coast gets really battered there. And so he came for a session because ever since a really bad storm pretty much, destroyed most of his property, he was having a lot of anxiety. Like anytime there was thunder or winds, he started having a certain degree of anxiety, not crippling, but just enough that he said, I need to have a session, and maybe there's more to it than, what we're dealing with in this current life.
Yeah.
So during a hurricane where he refused to get out, because you're supposed to evacuate, he chose not to evacuate.
Right.
The house was pretty much destroyed. And after the storm, a lot of animals just are on their own. So this cat wandered up to his house, and they just became instant buddies. He took the cat in, adopted the cat, of course, looked around, there was no owners to be found.
Right.
And so this was his cat. So during the regression, though, he actually went back. This was a surprise, that his storm fear really was residual from an island life when he lived on an Asian island. He was sensing maybe around the Taiwan area, but this was in very, very ancient times. And he saw himself standing on the beach with all the villagers, just watching as this wall of water, this big tsunami was coming, and it was about to wipe out the entire village. And he remembered that his little kitty cat, he just recognized, see, it's more like a soul recognition than, you don't go, oh, wow, that cat looks the same as it looks now. It's more like looking into someone's eyes and connecting with their soul. So he said, oh, I recognize that. That's my cat. Because he was there too. He was a cat in the village. But when you're standing there and then there's a wall of water, you've got, seconds, and then it's all going to be over. Mm-hmm. So when he came back from it, we do a lot of healing, like where we're putting light on things, we're cutting cords with things that are traumatic. But he walked out of that just feeling like, oh, okay, I don't feel like I'm going to have anxiety for storms anymore. But because I've actually seen, the actual devastation, not only in the island life, but in my current life of what can happen, he made a new, let's say, a vow, or just decided that from then on, if they did ask for evacuations, that he was going to go ahead and leave.
He would do.
So I ran into him again, and he said that yes, they had an evacuation, and this time now, of course, he picks up his cat, and the two of them drive north to safety together. And he was feeling a lot better about it. So.
What I liked about this so much is that at the end of each story, you talk about what they learned, and he learned gratitude, to be grateful for what you have. And he says, nothing lasts forever, and stuff is not important. I mean, that was huge. That was his lesson. He learned that stuff was not important. It was his life was more precious.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that theme going on in the current society as well, as we see all the weirdness that's going on. But definitely, if you're going, well, I'm going to stay in my house, this is my stuff, and I'm not leaving it, and then you realize, well, your stuff got damaged anyway, and you're lucky to be alive, then you start to realize, wait a minute, the friendship that he had with the cat and the love that he had for his little buddy meant so much more, and that's really what life's about.
Right, exactly. There's one more I wanted to talk about on cats before we move on to dogs. You have Seth was a veterinarian, and you took him back he ended up in Russia in the 1800s. And he said, Felix is here. And do you remember that story? They were on he wasn't on a wagon train. I'm thinking of the other one with Melissa, but what was the one where Seth was the veterinarian in the 1800s? Do you remember that one?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes people just want to have a deeper understanding of like their soul purpose and their journey. And so Seth was a veterinarian. So obviously he had a deep connection to animals.
Right.
He didn't specifically come in for that, but sometimes that's the gift of a regression, is it can help you either identify talents and interests that maybe you forgot about. But in this case, of course, he went back to this Russian circus. And as people can probably imagine, they weren't exactly, kind to the animals, but he, as a soul, like that was part of his mission. He went out of his way to share his food and to sneak around and make sure they were being cared for properly. And so he happened to encounter, again, the soul. He recognized the soul of the cat. As a vet, the vets end up taking in all kinds of animals. So he had adopted the cat that he named Felix.
Right.
And Felix was one of those, when you go into a store and there's just this super cool shop cat who kind of relaxes and kind of hangs out on the front counter and greets everyone. So that was kind of how this cat was. He was just really chill and just greeted everybody, whether they be cat, dog, bird, or whatever, never got wound up. And so he said, oh my gosh, it's him, and he was just coming to kind of be his companion and friend and comfort him for the kindness that he had been shown in the life in Russia. So they were there again together for a reason. And then it deepens the fact that, oh, okay, yeah, I'm exactly where I need to be. We all need to hear that from time to time. And so it just deepened his commitment to his profession and really knowing that this is something he's been doing for a long time.
Yeah, because I wrote down, he said, Felix is here to thank me for my help and support my sole purpose, which is to help animals no matter what. I thought that was really cool. That surprises me, I guess, more than anything, is that somehow the universe orchestrates it in such a way that we end up with this pet. I mean, it blows my mind, because I know I went found Gracie in a shelter, or not in a shelter, but in a boat. And I found a dog I had at a shelter. So it's like, but I know those pets are really connected to me. So it's amazing to me. And I want you to address that if you would. How do these, gosh, how do they find us, or how do we find them? It's so crazy.
It really is. I think people think, well, how is that even possible that you would
Yeah.
know this animal from a past life or whatever? I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
I just don't, I guess maybe we haven't always taken the time to really think of how, have you thought about how significant it is to spend, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years of your life, let's say for a cat or even a dog or horses or even longer with
Mm-hmm.
your animal, spending that quiet time, having them love you, loving them back, learning how to give, learning how to receive, and learning how to really feel unconditional love. It's so deep that, like when I found Biscuit, my cat had just passed away. She had been gone a couple months. I was in one of those stages where I was like, I'll never love again.
Oh my
And I
God,
just
Jill.
heard, because
Yeah,
it's so
no.
heartbreaking. You think I
Yeah,
can't do this again. I heard the inner voice say, you need to go to the pound today.
right.
And I was like, no, I don't want to go to the pound because I know I'm not going to come home empty handed. And then there he was. I mean, I just feel
Wow.
like it's a soul thing. It's your guides will help you, but your higher self. I mean, I think it's destiny,
Yeah,
just like it's destiny to meet your spouse or your best friend.
right.
You have to know there's something bigger at work here that I think is beyond any of our comprehension, really, because it's so beautiful and
Right.
so profound.
There's one more I want to talk about with cats before we move on. And I thought this was really cool. This was Melissa, and she was repaying a past life debt. In the mid 1800s, there was a wagon train she was on with her mom, and they were going to Oregon, and her mom passed, and all she had left was her pets. And she came really connected with those pets. I thought that was an amazing story, that she realized that the pets were here today to thank her for what she had done for them way back when.
Yeah, a lot of these stories, because, they happened so long ago, nowadays, they didn't have Petco and all that. And they didn't let
Yeah.
Augie come to Starbucks with us, back in the, wagon train days. You would have thought that that's an animal. We don't deal with those.
Yeah.
But when people go out of their way to show kindness to the animal
Right.
comes back and repays them. In this case, yes, her mother had passed. She ended up settling in the same Oregon area in the current life that she had lived back then. And there was just that sense of just someone who was really there for her at one of the darkest chapters of her life,
Mm-hmm.
that it was both of them were giving to each other. The pet obviously received love and attention that it wouldn't have gotten from hardly anyone else, but likewise she had a companion there who really was able to comfort her in the darkest chapters of her life.
Yeah, and take care of her. I want you to tell the story. I want to move on to some of the dogs. Now, this really floored me. I was just floored about your experience with the dog. When you were 4 years old, do you want to tell the story? When you were 4 years old, you were attacked by a dog.
Yeah, I was in a family member's yard. I don't know. I mean, I can't say that I wasn't doing anything, but supposedly I was just on the swing set and the dog was older, probably had dementia, and attacked me, had my face in his mouth. I've still got, tooth marks here. Part of my nose was bitten off.
I know, that's what
And
you said.
so
I was like floored. I was like, whoa.
yeah, it was, the only thing I remember I don't remember anything about that other than just being in the hospital and having this white light on me. But because of that, there was a real primal fear that was very deep, obviously, about any dogs. Like you could have a little
Right.
Yorkshire Yapper or whatever, even though I might think it's cute. I mean, I just don't want to hear dogs barking. I can't handle it. It's not, I mean, it was kind of just something that has been with me my whole life. So probably not enough to say, hey, I need therapy over this, but it was just a fear that
It was
stayed.
traumatic
Yeah.
for you. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I finally just thought, it's just time for me to be done with this. I'm sick of it. I don't want to deal with it anymore. And I don't know why, but even though I do past life regression, sometimes it takes me a while, ding, ding, to go, hey, maybe I should have a past life regression about this.
I know.
But I think that what happens, people are afraid to go into the past life because I think largely we're afraid to see what we're going to find. But
Yeah.
then what's happening, kind of like when I saw Biscuit was a sheep. I mean, that was just nothing I ever would have thought of. And likewise, I mean, I was thinking, well, this is probably some karma, I probably something happened and now I'm going to see what it is. Let's just do this. I just need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
What I found was something completely opposite. I had many lives. All I saw was just bam, 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 bam. All these lifetimes that I had with these huge dogs in some cases, as companions, as helpers, as hunters, as friends. And there was just something about connecting with that energy of all the different lifetimes that I had had with the dogs
Right.
that, there just comes a point where you just go, oh, okay, I guess I'm done with this now. I don't need to worry about that anymore. And then I was just done with it. Now I go
That's
out to the
awesome.
park, the dogs are walking up to me. I don't have a problem with it anymore. I'm just done with it.
Shelley, if somebody wants to have a past life regression with you, how can they do that? How do they contact you?
If they go to my website, which is at pastlifelady.com, and there's
Okay.
a sessions link, they can just look there.
Okay. And they can do a Zoom, like they don't have to be where you are. You can do this over the internet, correct?
Oh yeah. Well, what's interesting is because I started getting a lot of media exposure back in the early 2000s, and so I started getting contacted by people from all over the world because my regression technique was endorsed by Dr. Brian Weiss,
Okay.
who endorsed my first book, and I used to take his overflow clients for him. So I've been doing this so long that
Right.
there's no way I'm going to be able to help somebody, in Australia or England or wherever else they're calling me from. So I started doing regressions by phone,
Okay.
not even with video. And people go, well, how is that even possible? But it's because we're together, we're still connected. And when I take you on guided imagery to do your past life, you're still going to have your eyes closed.
Right.
And my process is a little bit different than other hypnotherapists because I send you energy while we're going, because I really believe there's an energetic component to memory. And so I'm going to work to send you energy because there's a thought form out here that's connected to that memory, let's say, of that past life with the dog. And so we
Right.
need to heal that, move it out, and it creates a really profound change. So now, yes, we can do it by Zoom, but we
I
can
love
still, of course,
it.
do it by phone, and it
I
works.
love it. Hey, listen, we got to go to commercial, but you guys, we're here today with Shelley Kaehr, and this is Nancy You're Out, and we'll be right back. Hi, it's Nancy You're Out. We're here with the past life lady, one of my great friends who I just adore. And thanks for coming on the show today, Shelley. I sure appreciate it.
Nancy, you're amazing. You are my dear friend, too.
Thank you.
We've been around the block probably
I
somewhere.
think so too. When you said Scotland, I'm like, oh, we probably knew each other in Scotland for sure. I
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, there are so many different things that you talk about in the book. There were a lot of stories about dogs. One that I'm looking at on my notes here is about Joel. 20,000 years ago, he had a dog and they helped each other. They shared food. Do you remember this story a little bit? They worked together.
Yes. Let me see. I don't remember it as well. I have to say.
That's okay. But there were so many that I picked up and I wrote down so many notes. I'm sure you don't want to tell every story that's in your book. You want people to buy the book and check it out. And I'm sure they can get it on Amazon, right?
I can tell them when I remember.
Tell when you remember.
People think that's crazy, but I don't remember all of them all the time. But
That's okay.
the one that really stuck out to me was, it's kind of a story of redemption. It was this
Okay.
man who, when he was a kid, he was like a troubled youth. And so he had to go to a youth camp out in Utah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I read that one.
And
Yeah.
he really, oh wait, I guess that was a horse story. Okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay, I'm skipping. Sorry. I'll tell the
That's
dog
okay.
story next. I do know the dog story. Anyway, he went out there and he learned to ride horseback over the summer. And so he ended up becoming so fascinated with it. He actually started working as a farrier. So he was doing putting the shoes on the horses and caring for horses. That was like his profession.
Right.
And so he just came in, again, not for what he was bargaining for, but ended up going back into this past life where he saw that he was on a wagon train with the family who owned the ranch in Utah, and that he was their son then. And he recognized the love that they had for him, and the fact that love really carried over to the current life, and the love that they showed him. And that if it hadn't been for them, I mean, theoretically, he wouldn't have ever been exposed to horses in his current life. But
Right.
he saw that this was actually part of his soul purpose, and that he was really destined, just like we were saying with the cats earlier, he was really
Yeah.
destined to meet these people. And he was able to totally turn his life around. And so it just goes to show that, we all have hard times of a different nature, but we can obviously turn our lives around. And in this case, the horses were a huge part of that.
Yeah. And
Oh,
didn't
but I
he?
do remember a dog story too, if you want one.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
The one that I always think about was this man came in again for general purposes. Sometimes people are just curious. And he happened to just offhandedly mention the fact that he lived in a little town and he was working as a volunteer firefighter.
Oh, yeah.
And he was kind of fascinated with this. He was having a regular job, though. It wasn't anything he did full time. And he went back into the past and he saw himself living at the turn of the century in San Francisco. And he was there fighting fires during the San Francisco earthquake. And he saw the Dalmatian that was in the firehouse and said that that's the same dog that was in his current volunteer firehouse.
Wow.
And it just brought him the awareness that the firefighting is part of his soul. It's part of his journey. He definitely has a talent for doing this, because it is a talent.
Mm-hmm.
And though that was not necessarily what he was supposed to do full time in this life, but it gave him a lot of clarity about that aspect of his soul purpose. So.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. You know what I liked, and I was going to ask you about, you talk about birds and you say there's a falcon. There was a guy, Tom, and he kept dreaming about falcons, and he found himself back in Mongolia working with golden eagles and training them. Can you talk about that? Because I thought that was fascinating too.
Yeah, I think that the past lives can sometimes seep through the dream world. And so
Yeah.
that was what was happening here. He was having these ongoing visions of this. And so in his past life, he was one of these Mongolian hunters who worked with the golden eagles. And he recognized, he was one of the ones, like you go to a fair these days, or like the medieval
Yeah.
festivals, and they have
Yeah.
all the raptors because they maybe got injured in nature, and so they get taken in by well-meaning people who are helping them recover, and then they end up training them and they do shows and things. So he was one of those people. And he
Okay.
had a really special connection with one of his falcons. And again, at the soul level, just gazing into its eyes, he realized, oh, you know what, we knew each other in Mongolia. And he was just, again, further brought into this awareness, because not everyone is going to be able to have the level of intuitive talent, to do what he was doing with not only the falcons, but just all the different birds of prey that he was working with. And so he was able to really understand that as a soul purpose again, but also just sense that connection and friendship.
Yeah, and he said the lessons, and I thought this was interesting. He said the lessons that the falcons and the golden eagles teach us were respect, partnership, stewardship, and that we should live in harmony with nature and realize that animals have much to teach us. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was really neat. You go and you talk about guinea pigs too. I thought this was really interesting. I mean, I was like, whoa, you were talking about Sylvia, and she she had this guinea pig and you did a regression. Tell us about this one, because this is kind of
one
wild.
Of my favorites. This is the weird one, folks, so get ready for this. Okay, so this woman, I started identifying a phenomenon that I call supretravy, which is a supernatural past life memory that's triggered by travel.
Right.
And I think sometimes the soul is drawn back to places where it has been before, physically.
Right.
So this woman was itching to go to Peru. And so she came to see me after her trip to Peru because it brought up some kind of what I would call a supernatural past life memory. So she went into the past life and she realized that she had been in Peru. And one thing that the viewers and listeners may not be aware of about the Peruvians is that for thousands of years, the guinea pig has been on the menu there.
And they still today, I was like, they eat guinea pigs. Oh my God. Yeah.
I was there.
They still do, right?
Yes, they do. Yes.
Oh my God.
My friend ordered one. I was like, she's a lot braver than I am. I don't know. It seemed a little too weird for me.
Yeah.
This woman went to Peru and discovered this. And during her regression, she saw that she was a living in a village, and they had the guinea pigs. They were kind of like the way we would raise cattle on a farm here,
Crazy.
to be turned into our food supply.
Yeah.
And she really became attached to one of them, but then it kind of disappeared. And then she came to understand that it had been part of the menu for the family. And so in her current life, her whole life, ever since she was a kid, she always had guinea pigs. And so in the regression, the other thing that happens during this book that I talk about is the fact that because the animals have such a shorter lifespan than we do,
Yeah.
in some cases, and including this one, which is, like I said, this is the ultra weirdest case study in the book. She kept having this guinea pig. It just kept,
Coming back.
going away, coming back, going away. And so she had a guinea pig currently, and it was the same one that she had had a couple other times during her life. And it was the same one that this is what she was telling herself in regression, that it was the same guinea pig she had back in Peru, and that her mission was to, make amends.
Well, and I just thought that was fascinating. One thing that really fascinated me is that you do talk about people who you've taken back, and this was really cool. I thought, Shelley, you say, look at your feet, and you say, are you a man or a woman? And you say, and they're kind of like hesitant, and you say, get a mirror and put it down there. What is that? And they say they have paws.
Yes.
That kind of blew my mind. I was like, whoa. And there was one about a bear, where a man from Canada who lived in Canada, and his family wanted him to move from Canada, but he was like so attached to that place, and he couldn't figure out why. And you took him back in a regression, and you found out he was a bear.
Yeah, he was a Canadian bear, and he was just really connected to the land. He had obviously walked it very extensively in the past, and he just was attached to the land. He wasn't going to leave.
That just blows my mind. I don't know. So when you do this, and I just have to ask you this question. So if you're doing a past life regression and then somebody looks down, do they freak out when they realize that they were an animal at one point in their life? And how is that? Do they tell you like how they feel and what they see, and how does that work?
Yeah, the idea of even with a regular regression, when we're not talking about animals, sometimes it depends on the client. Like, most people are visual, some are more auditory, they're hearing things, but the touchy-feely people sometimes have a more difficult time accessing past life memories. So if I'm sensing that they're having difficulty accessing, that's when I'll have them look down at their feet, so that they can either feel what kind of clothes they're wearing, or they sometimes can get just that brief flash of, oh, I'm wearing a pair of boots. That's usually what I hear, right? But sometimes then they're like, OMG, and then then if they can't articulate this, because sometimes if they're really in hypnosis and they're locked into that animal consciousness, the animal wouldn't even have the words for that. So I'll have them just bring the mirror out. And then these are just tools that I'm using to try to help them access it. So there's definitely been a few gasps of,
Right. Well, I would imagine, because that would be shocking to your soul to realize that you were an animal. So I wonder, and I'm just throwing this out there, has anybody ever said, well, I chose to do this because I wanted to learn this or that? Is it compassion or what do you
They usually do. Yeah, they'll say, because part of the journey is and again, I guess to vary the case studies in the book, I don't always include these, but yeah, part of what I'm always going to ask a client is, what lessons did you learn? Why is this applying to what we're doing now? And even when they're animals, of course, yes, they've got reasons for doing it. Maybe they were supposed to be nonverbal, or maybe they were supposed to learn just how to survive, or how to be, or how to, commune with nature, or just different kinds of lessons that they're learning.
No, I just think that's awesome. Hey, listen, we're getting ready to go to commercial break. You guys, you got to check out her book. It's called Past Lives with Pets. Discover your timeless connections to your beloved companions. And I want to just say, before we go to commercial, there are a bunch of meditations, and we'll talk about that when we come back, that you guys can do, so you can do a regression if you want to on your own. This is Nancy Yearout. I'm here today with Shelley Kaehr, and this is High Road to Humanity, and we'll be right back. Hi, it's Nancy Yearout. I'm here with Shelley Kaehr, and we're talking about our pets. Shelley, there's all these really cool exercises that you put in the back of the book, and I thought that was really neat. Can you talk about some of these for people?
Yeah, it's important that I always include exercises in the book because I want readers to be able to try some of these things
Yeah.
themselves. And the good news is that thanks to phone apps, you can take these exercises, just read them aloud into your telephone, and then play them back and try some of these things. So I've included, we mentioned earlier in the show about grief recovery. That's a huge thing. So there's a journey to help people who have lost a pet. I think that's really
Okay.
important, where we can reconnect with the pet and heal that. And then
Okay.
there's also journeys where we can get in touch with animal guides, because I believe that we
Yeah.
have all kinds of guides.
Will you talk about that? Because the shamans say that we all have an animal guide. Talk about that. And what do you think? And you also mentioned an author who wrote a book about that.
Yes, yes. Really early on when I was getting into all this, I have loved the book Animal Speak by Ted Andrews, who was a Llewellyn author, and God rest his soul, he passed away many years ago.
Okay.
I have had that book in my library for years, and I met him years ago at an expo, but he was always one of my heroes. He has a beautiful book where he basically has all the different animals. And what he's saying is, like, when you go out in nature, like let's say you went for a walk this morning and you saw a duck, or you saw, I've got some egrets out here near where I live, then you should go look them up, because they're there for a reason. The universe is presenting them to you symbolically to help you with certain things on your path. And so you can get all kinds of wisdom from that. And so he talked a lot about why it's important to connect with our animal guides, because, a lot of, like, in regression, usually I help people connect with guides, but it might be, a being of light or an angel. But, we
Mhm.
also have animal guides as well. And
Right.
for some of the clients that I've been taking people through this journey lately, some of them have never connected with an animal guide before, but we go into a really peaceful space, the same space that you'd go into to connect with an angel. And sure enough, to their surprise, they're like, whoa, an animal just walked out. This is amazing. And then we can get in touch with them. Well, what are you here to help me with? And what can I learn from you? And I think that that's just another way to receive some really amazing information intuitively that helps us on our path.
Yeah, it is. And you talk about that makes me think about the bird, the cardinal story that you tell. And the reason I think about that is because when my dad was getting ready to pass, I would have this yellow bird that would come to my window. And I didn't know my dad was going to pass, but he was older, he was 89. And he kept pecking on the window and pecking on the window and pecking on the window. And I told my husband, I said, this is really bizarre. This yellow bird keeps pecking. He's always trying to get bugs. And I said, I don't think so. He just kept pecking on, and it went on for like 2 weeks right before my dad passed. And then he passed, and I thought that was my dad trying to tell me, that he was getting ready to go, is what I think. But you talk in the book about a cardinal, similar story. Can you tell that real quick for us?
Yes, that's this man's grandmother had passed, and she lived on a farmhouse. And so what they noticed is right after her passing, that this bright red cardinal just kept coming out of nowhere, and just, like, kind of like what happened to you, was just knocking on the window of the grandmother's bedroom
Yeah.
upstairs, bam, 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 and wouldn't stop. They were like, we don't want this bird to hurt itself, but it just won't stop. And so somebody had just said, hey, this must be grandmother. And so during his regression, we did a healing on that, where she was able to come and say, yes, that was me. Because, we talked earlier in the show also about the different religions, and a lot of the
Right.
Asian religions really do believe in animal incarnations. And so
Mm-hmm.
they had been Japanese in a former life. And in the Japanese Shinto religion, they really believe that your soul could leave the body and then go inhabit a bird. And so she was just showing him something about the fact that she had inhabited this bird for a period of time. And then we did a healing on that,
How
so that
weird.
he was able to just, have a conversation. This is similar to the pet grief journey too. We just have a conversation with people and or the animal,
Right.
kind of come to peace, and then send them up to the light. And so he just felt a lot better. And of course, they never saw the cardinal again. But
Yeah.
when I hear the story about what happened to you, I say, absolutely, I believe it.
Yeah. Well, and I had another one happen, and I'll ask you about this. I don't know if it means anything or not, but we live on a lake. And so one day I went down to get the mail, and there was this duck, and he wasn't a regular duck. He was like one of those kind with a red head, and he was kind of black feathers and white feathers. I don't even know the name. I looked him up at the time, but I can't tell you what he was. And we live way up on a hill, and there must be 25 steps to get up to our house. And this duck followed me up. And he followed me all the way up to the house, and he stood there at the front door. And I thought, okay, well, maybe he's hungry. So I gave him some cat food. I didn't know what to do. So, and I'm freaking out and I'm filming him and he's talking to me and he's shaking his tail feathers and he's doing his thing. And this duck continued and then when he got ready to go, this will blow your mind. When he got ready to leave, he would stand there at the edge of the steps and he would kind of get ready because it was kind of heavy. And he would just take off and fly up in the air. And this went on for, I would say, 2-3 weeks. He would come up and see me. And when my husband would come home, he really didn't like him so much. He would kind of peck at him or peck at his shoes and stuff. But then then he was gone and I never saw him again. But it was the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to me. That I had this duck that wanted to hang out, and he would stand at my door. He would sit on the front porch like he was a cat or something. What do you think, Shelley?
I don't know. It floated in. I'm wondering if it was someone you knew who passed, who was just saying hello, or
Yeah,
someone
that's
you've
what I
known from the
wonder.
past. It feels like someone you had a relationship in the past.
I never thought about that.
I don't know. That's what's floating in. I don't know.
I thought that was great.
I had done another interview for this, and the host told me that him and his wife both thought that when a cat passed, that it just went and found another cat to inhabit.
Oh,
So, when you're talking about the duck, it just feels like that's somebody you know. I don't know.
that's crazy. Well, thanks for telling me that. One thing I want to talk about, we only have a few more minutes, but I wanted you to talk about the shark, the guy who was the shark. That just blew my mind too. I mean, he was a businessman and he was a shark in business, and then you regressed him and he was a shark.
Yeah, he was one of these real aggressive business guys. He was a real piece of work. God bless him. I mean that in the best way. But he had gone on one of these South African safari things, and when you go over there, you can get inside a cage and go be plunged in the ocean in real life, and these great whites will come up and bang their schnozzes against the cage, and so
Right.
macho people like to do this. So he went on this trip and in real life, and the shark was kind of coming up and looking at him,
Yeah.
and they were kind of buddies. And so during his regression, he actually went back. I've heard all kinds of far out stuff. This was definitely one of the really far out ones, but he said that he was a shark in a past life.
Yeah.
And that's why he had this kind of communal energy with sharks. And so then he came back and had some correlation to the fact that, you got to be a shark in life to get ahead. And, he was a character.
Yeah, that was interesting. The last thing, one thing I want to talk about before I let you go today is and I thought this was really, really cool that you did this in your book. At the very end, you have different gems, amethyst, rose quartz, crystal, selenite, and you talk about how they help our animals and even sage. I sage my house to clear the energy. Can you address that a little bit? Because I thought that was really interesting for people.
Yeah, the other area that I've got a ton of books on is gem and mineral healing. Like I've got tons of books on that because it was one of my dear hobbies that turned into a profession. And so I have a lot of information about stones. And in my early career as an energy healer, I was doing a ton of animal healing, like at horse barns and for pets and different things. And so there are certain stones that are just vibrationally really easier on pets. Amethyst is number one. Selenites are great. Rose quartz. Sometimes the animals are so sensitive though, like you can put a stone in, like particularly with horses, they're super sensitive. But if you take like an amethyst or a rose quartz and just set it in their stall, and you can charge it up with Reiki or something and just send them like really loving vibrations from afar, that can really make a huge difference on the horse's behavior. I was called out to do a lot of cases like that. And so I just put a quick section in there for people to consider that your little pet is super sensitive to energy and can really benefit from those things.
Well, I don't even think about that because I sage my house, and I'm saging it because I want to clear the energy and get the negative energy out and bring in the positive. But I didn't even realize, this energy affects the pets.
There's a connection there. Sometimes the other thing, sometimes pets, I was talking about like salt, like sometimes if you're going through a big change, you can put like a little Epsom salt on the food, or just a dash of table salt can help the pet integrate changes that you're going through, because your pet is so connected to you. Okay. It's kind of like what happened with me and Biscuit. We're so connected that that if I'm not feeling well, you know, he'll come up and try to comfort me. And I'm sure your listeners and viewers have had that happen too. Your dogs are, you know, right by your side, or your
Mm-hmm.
horse or whatever, your cat. They are
Mm-hmm.
more connected to you than you think. So when you're going through big changes, then they're going through big changes. And so they really do need energetic support as well.
Right. Hey, Shell, we're getting close to the end of the show here. What has been, since this book's been out, Past Lives with Pets, any really cool, comments, or anybody come and say anything really interesting about the book, how it's helped them, or?
What has happened, Nancy, is I've received literally dozens of letters from people, and
Really?
they send me pictures of their little pet that passed away. And you know, so I did I did something on my YouTube channel where it's kind of an in memorandum journey. It's the journey out of this book. I put it up on my YouTube channel for people so that they could
Okay.
go have a visionary encounter with their pet that they loved and
What's your
lost.
YouTube channel?
It's Past Life Lady.
Okay. We'll make
Past
it
Life
easy.
Lady on YouTube. So there's a journey there people can go on, because I was literally getting dozens of letters and photos of the cutest little kitty cats and
Wow.
doggies. And, you know, it just breaks my heart, because I know how hard it is when we lose our pet. It's like
Mm-hmm.
losing a, it's sometimes it's worse than losing a member of our family. I mean, let's
I
face it.
know. I know.
So
I'm
when,
really glad you wrote this. It was really, really cool. You guys have to read this. The stories in here, I mean, we only just touched on some of these stories. The stories are amazing. Past Lives with Pets, you guys discover your timeless connections to your beloved companion. Shelley, tell everybody how they can get in contact with you again.
they can come check out pastlifelady.com. I'm on Facebook. I've got Past Life Lady as my fan page. YouTube is Past Life Lady. If they want to see pictures of little Biscuit and also some other cats that I had when I was younger, they can check out my Instagram, which
Nice.
is at Shelley Kaehr. That also goes on to Past Life Lady page though on Facebook. So they ought to check out some of those weird pictures I posted.
I
A
love it. I
biscuit
love
and a
it.
sheep.
And the sheep. Okay, cool. Shelley, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And you've helped me, and I'm sure the audience, very, very much with this book. Okay.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's
Okay.
great to connect with you. I wish
Great
you
to
many more
connect with
things.
you too. I know we could hang out and talk for another hour. Hey, you guys, this is Nancy Earl. Join us next week and have a great week. Take care.